The rain had been falling for hours, gentle at first, then merciless. It washed over the cracked pavement outside the hospital, blurring reflections of flickering streetlights. Inside, the sterile air carried whispers of grief, exhaustion, and the faint hum of machines keeping fragile lives alive. Emily sat hunched on the plastic bench, her trembling hands clutching a damp photograph. Her son, Liam, smiling with a missing tooth and a paper crown he'd made in art class. He was just 6 years old, and right now, fighting for his life behind a glass door labeled Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. Her world had crumbled in a heartbeat. A car accident on their way home from school, an out-of-control driver, and now, a mother's desperate hope battling the silence of uncertainty. Before we go deeper into this heart-touching journey, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories, because somewhere out there, a story like this might just give someone the strength to hold on. Emily had stopped counting the hours. Her coffee had gone cold long ago, and her phone kept lighting up with messages from people she didn't have the strength to answer. Doctors came and went, their expressions unreadable. The world outside kept moving. Cars honked, people hurried through puddles. But for her, time had frozen in the narrow hallway of that children's hospital. Every sound that came from the ICU made her heart race. Every passing nurse made her rise halfway, only to sit again when they walked by without calling her name. It was then that she noticed him, a man sitting a few chairs away, hands clasped tightly, staring into the same void of silence. His clothes were neat but worn, his eyes dark with sleeplessness. He looked like someone who carried more than his share of pain. When she glanced again, she caught him watching her, not with curiosity, but with something gentler, understanding. Hours passed before anyone spoke. When the nurse called Emily's name and she stumbled to her feet, the man stood too, as if ready to catch her if she fell. The update was brief. Liam was stable, but still unconscious. Stable. That word felt like a lifeline. When she returned to her seat, shaking, the man finally spoke softly. "He's your son?" She nodded, unable to find her voice. "You've been sitting here since morning," he continued quietly. "You should eat something. You'll need your strength when he wakes up." His tone was calm, not intrusive. She blinked at him through tears. "I can't eat. I can't think. I just need him to open his eyes." The man looked down, his jaw tightening. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "I know that feeling." There was a pause before Emily asked, barely audible, "Do you have a child too?" He nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "That's why I understand your pain." Something in his words broke her. She covered her face, sobbing quietly, and for the first time in 2 days, she didn't feel entirely alone. The stranger didn't say anything more. He simply sat there, his presence a silent comfort amid her storm. Over the next few days, their paths kept crossing. She learned his name, Michael Turner, a former firefighter. His son, Aiden, was 10 and had been admitted weeks ago with severe burns from a house fire. Emily couldn't imagine what that kind of pain must feel like. Every day, Michael brought coffee for both of them. They talked about little things at first. The weather, the cafeteria food, the sleepless nights, but gradually, the walls between their griefs began to fall. One evening, as the rain poured again, Emily found herself telling him everything. How she had raised Liam alone after her husband walked out. How she'd been saving for his piano lessons. How guilty she felt for not noticing the speeding car that day. Michael listened, never interrupting. When she finally broke down, he said quietly, "You can't blame yourself for what you couldn't control. Believe me, I've tried doing that, and it only destroys you." He told her his own story. The fire that took his wife and left his son fighting for survival. The guilt that had nearly consumed him because he couldn't save them both. "I was a firefighter," he said bitterly. "I saved strangers for years. But when it mattered most, I couldn't save my own family." His voice cracked. "It took me months to realize that loving them doesn't mean you could have changed fate." Emily reached out and placed her trembling hand over his. For the first time, they shared a silence that wasn't empty. Days turned into weeks. Liam began to recover slowly. Tiny movements, fluttering eyelids, faint words that sounded like hope. Michael was there through all of it, bringing her meals, sitting with her when she couldn't bear the waiting. When Liam finally opened his eyes and asked, "Mom, are you crying?" Emily collapsed beside his bed, laughing and weeping at once. Michael stood outside the room, watching quietly, a faint smile breaking through his tired face. In the days that followed, Emily noticed how Liam seemed drawn to Michael. They talked about toy cars and superheroes. Aiden, though still recovering in another ward, sent Liam handmade cards, clumsy but full of heart. The hospital had become more than a place of pain. It had become a strange, fragile home built from shared loss and unexpected compassion. But life, even in its healing, carries tests. One morning, Michael wasn't there. The chair where he always sat was empty, and his coffee cup was missing. Hours later, a nurse told Emily that Aiden's condition had worsened overnight. He'd been moved to intensive care again. Emily rushed to find him, her heart pounding. She found Michael outside the ICU door, leaning against the wall, his face pale and hollow. "He's not responding," he whispered when he saw her. "They're doing everything they can." Emily didn't hesitate. She took his hand, just as he had once held her through her darkest hours. "Don't lose hope," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "If there's one thing I've learned from you, it's that love is stronger than pain. Your son feels you. He's fighting because you're still standing." They stood there together, hours melting into one another, praying in silence. At dawn, the door finally opened. The doctor smiled faintly. "He's stable," he said. "It'll take time, but he's a fighter." Michael's knees gave out, and Emily caught him before he fell. In that moment, words weren't needed. They both knew what survival meant, the cost, the gratitude, the miracle of another tomorrow. As the weeks passed, their children recovered side by side. The hospital's cold corridors slowly filled with laughter, small steps, and the sound of renewed life. Emily and Michael spent their days together, not because of obligation, but because their hearts had learned to beat in rhythm through shared pain. When they finally walked out of that hospital, Liam clutching Emily's hand, Aiden walking slowly beside his father, the morning sun broke through the clouds. It felt like a new beginning neither of them had expected. They stood by their cars in the parking lot, uncertain what came next. Emily smiled softly. "I guess this is goodbye," she said. Michael shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "It's just a different kind of beginning." Months later, they met again, not by accident this time. Their boys were stronger, laughing as they chased each other across the park. Emily watched them, her heart full, while Michael sat beside her on the bench. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with gratitude rather than grief. She turned to him and said, half smiling, "Do you ever think about how strange life is? How pain can bring people together in ways happiness never could?" Michael nodded, watching their sons play. "I used to think pain broke people," he said softly. "Now I think it just makes space for deeper love." The wind brushed past them, carrying the sound of laughter and rustling leaves. Emily looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Thank you for understanding when I couldn't even understand myself." He smiled faintly. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost, hope." And as the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Emily realized that sometimes the people who save us are not the ones we expect, but the ones who've been broken too, and still choose to love anyway. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Every engagement helps us bring more real, emotional stories of love, loss, and second chances to people who need them. Speech Balloon special request. Before you leave, comment below, "Hope lives, even after pain." To remind someone reading that healing is possible, no matter how dark life gets. Because sometimes, all it takes is one shared story to remind the world that empathy still exists.